him on that, I didn't see, I was talking to Gary.
I don't
It
know.
just made you fume.
Did it? Well, I didn't because I was over at my daughter's helping her decorate her new house.
Well, I think they want to have this or, oh, the next one, I don't think so, just maybe Chicago area, but it was.
I'll have
It
to
was
ask
a
her.
really,
Yeah.
Fridays worked well for you.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I mean, I'm glad I watched it, but it made me fume.
Yeah.
Yes, I can imagine.
So you get a 3 to lose. Yeah. Yeah.
That's like my kids and talking.
Just different things. Well,
No, others said.
I'm never quite. It feels that way anyhow.
I'm glad to see there's kind of some more people here.
Yes, please. Thank you. No problem. Here, I'll just ask her.
Yeah, we were there in July this year. So
I do. How are you?
good, good, good.
I know.
Los Angeles.
That's what they have. And a head full of black hair. Head full of black hair. It's old school, isn't it? Refreshing. Oh, it's all right.
Thursday and Friday, I go to another workshop, and
I'm Janet. Nice to meet you.
I've got salaries and these kinds of pictures too. So that includes.
Oh, gosh.
You used to go to the shop. That doesn't mean it's like you talk to.
Oh, you want the door open?
Close the meeting for personnel matters. There's a way to do that. Ordinance. Is that what you prefer?
They wouldn't do it.
They were needed. That whole training is definitely. Don't know anything else about what it's supposed to be.
I don't either.
There are several. Paris has one teacher.
Maybe it's a lot of noise from people coming in.
And then you can have, run it, take point, some follows,
We just take a look at there until like. Day services, services only. They post every day.
We have to do that. It's going to be kind of general.
They post every day. I'm like it once a week.
stated, that's fine.
It's quick this
I quit long before that. About 10 years ago.
All right, I think we're close enough to time that I think we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, we'll have a call to order, so Jason, present, Kathy,
Present.
Dr. Shake, absent, I believe. I'm present, Dr. Rico, Allison,
Present.
Mrs. Ellis,
Present.
okay, Scott,
President?
and Dina.
Present.
Okay, so we got everyone, Dr. Shake. I'd like to introduce at this time our state's attorney, Tim Gilbert. Welcome, Tim. We had set this meeting up to have Tim come and address some of the questions and concerns that were raised by Lisa at our previous meeting. So we as a group decided that that would be the appropriate thing to do. So again, Tim, we're going to kind of let you take control and let you go over the things that you think are necessary that we need to work on. And then you can explain the attorney-client privilege now you want to work that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as I was kind of mentioning, my comments are going to be sort of general today due to, the ethical rules that I'm under attorney-client privilege. So if my comments bring up anything specific, then you can always contact me. I can advise you, and then the board can take necessary actions. So just bear that in mind, because if it seems basic, that's why. I think a couple things based on reporting that I've seen that might be an issue is, one, just an overview first of the Open Meetings Act, and then two, an overview of the statute that governs the Board of Public Health. So first, and I think, well, they're really equally important, but the Open
Could you
Meetings.
speak up, please?
I can try.
Okay, thank you.
I'm under the weather today, but I'll try.
Thanks.
So the Open Meetings Act obviously governs open meetings, right? It's what tells us that the public bodies need to have meetings that are open to the public, that are transparent, so that there can be accountability. And it lays out, first of all, a strong presumption that everything is going to be open. There are a few exceptions that are listed in there where closed meetings can happen, but even then, no final action can be taken at those meetings. All final actions have to be in an open setting, an open meeting setting. One of the major requirements in the Open Meetings Act is that when, other than setting out the minimum number of times a year that the meetings have to happen, setting out the notice requirements for the agendas and things like that, is the requirement of a quorum to conduct business. So that's one of the number one requirements. Looking through statute, there's really no exception to that. So even in the case of having people appear remotely, the statute says there still has to be a quorum physically present. If there's a quorum physically present, then one or two people can appear remotely, but there still has to be that quorum. And again, there are a couple of exceptions for statewide agencies. There's an exception for agencies that covers massive amounts of geographic area. None of those are. So that's kind of the first thing. This quorum requirement that's required to do business, and that's just to make sure that a minority of people on the board aren't conducting the business of the board, aren't kind of ruling over things, make the process more democratic. So, I guess that's the first thing. The first thing is if there's no quorum present at a meeting, there's no meeting. So the advice is, one, get a quorum, call whoever needs to be called, do whatever you need to do to get physically present, the quorum. If that's not possible, then the only thing that could really happen is reschedule. You're going to have to reschedule the meeting, and it's going to have to be far enough out to give that same 48 hours of notice, so that you get a quorum. That's really the only thing you can do at that point. So that's number one, is you really cannot take any actions without a quorum. The second part is, of course, the part of the code that governs what the Board of Public Health does, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But that kind of sets out, and there's two different sections of that. So there's a section that sets out what the board must do, and then there's a section that sets out what the board can do, but doesn't have to. And so that's really, one of those two categories is what you're going to be doing at those meetings. As an example, there's specifically in there, it says that setting salaries is something that the board does. Salaries for people who work for public health department. So that's one of the responsibilities of the board. And that responsibility is for the whole board. Right? It can't be delegated either by vote or by any means. It can't be delegated. It has to be done at an open meeting with a quorum, discussed by everyone, and then voted on by the quorum. That's the only way that it can be done, because that authority rests in the board, and it rests in the whole board. So, along with the authority to do all the other things that are listed in that statute. It's pretty lengthy, so we won't get into it all this morning, but that's there as well. And I think, as far as, like I said, if that raises any specific issues or specific questions, then I would say, contact me outside of the meeting, just for attorney-client privilege issues, and I can kind of advise, and then bring that back to the board and take whatever actions might be necessary.
Thank you. Any of the board have questions for him?
I do have one. I'd like to know if you, when we're going to be doing the evaluations on employees, do you have the employees there present when you have the evaluation for salaries, or do you not? Because I'm used to not having an employee there until the evaluations are done. So it's just a question.
That's one of those, I will look it up and get back to you.
Okay.
I'm not going to kind of spitball and just, shoot off the cuff. Find anything, but I'll write that down, I'll look it up and then get back to you.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay. Do you have anything else, Tim, you want to advise on the agenda, how we go about that? We do have, I think we'll go ahead and try to make come to a decision on our board meetings, and whether we do it once a month or more often, less often. So we'll do that, and then we'll discuss the administrative salaries at some point this morning. Any discussion from the board on thoughts on the timing of our, I guess in our history, we've had two. We've been, we're on every other month rotation right now. We've obviously, we did that 4 years ago, probably 5. Then once COVID started, we went back to being monthly. Then after that slowed down some, we went back to every other month. But again, it's been suggested maybe we continue to do it on a monthly basis. So I'd like to get some feelings on what the board feels.
I can bring up from where this came about as a discussion on county board is this is not the only entity that has moved to meeting every other month. And the issue is, as we, county board, we look at expenditures every month, and we realized that if you only meet every other month, then you are, as a board, approving expenditures after the fact. And you can, my understanding is that you can approve for an entity to go ahead and pay regular routine utility bills and such. But if it's anything other than that, we need to, as a board, approve ahead of time. And so that's why we are suggesting that some of these boards who have moved to every other month go back to moving to monthly.
Okay. I guess some question, does anybody have a problem with going to monthly meetings? Okay. Again, our time normally has been Wednesdays, third Wednesday of the month, 7 a.m. How's everybody feel about the time? Now's a chance to make a little change if we want to. I'm not suggesting we do, but it's your field, so we can talk about that if you want. Or I will entertain a motion to have monthly meetings, third Wednesday of the month, starting at 7 o'clock. Have a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Scott, second.
I'll second it.
Jason. Any more discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? So it passed, so we will be meeting monthly, third Wednesday of the month at 7 a.m. Okay. Now, is there discussion maybe on these administrative, Tim, how do we handle that as far as, do we go into closed session without our administrative group present, or other suggestions?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Okay. So before we do that, is there any other business that needs to be handled by this board this morning? I don't want to keep people, they don't have to be here.
I have a question for you. Does it have to be in closed session if we are talking about a position and not a person?
First, according to the statute, it doesn't have to be in closed session either way. That's up to the board. There's no requirement that it be closed session. It's just allowed if it's closed session when discussing salaries. When we get more specific on position versus person here. So if it's just a position, then no. The statute says, public body may hold closed meetings to consider the following subjects. 1, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees. So if it's just a position that you're talking about, no. If it's specific employees, then you can do a closed session, but you don't.
Well, since there are so many people here that this is why they are attending, I would suggest that we don't make it closed. But even if we do close it now, we can't take action, correct?
Correct.
In closed, so we're going to have to bring it back out of closed. And everybody's going to join us, and the only thing a closed meeting will have, and not that there's not value in that, the only thing a closed meeting will result in is our coming up with a position, a suggestion, or a way of moving forward. But we aren't actually going to move forward until we come back out of open, right? Or back out of closed.
Yeah, you can't, so you can take action in the closed session. That's correct. And I'm not advising one way or the other, that's up to the board, whether it's closed or open.
Well, it looks like this stage of the process, the salaries are in question at this point, and the question is whether we acted correctly, and which we know we probably didn't do everything correctly, but when the county board asks that we adjust or make a salary suggestion for our administrator because they were listed at the time as hourly, and it needed to be changed because the HR group that they hired found that they hadn't been, and they suggested that we do. So that was done, but it kind of called into question why or how we did it and why we did it. And so I think that's probably something that we can explain what we did and why we did, but with full knowledge that both the administrators at the time knew that when funds ran out for the COVID program, which allowed for us to do that, we knew there would be an adjustment with those. And so it was entered into in that context. The only thing the board recommended that we look at is if our funds for this program ran to the end of the year. They felt like it would be better if we did it sooner rather than later to make the adjustment. So I don't know. That's one thing. We as a board have to decide, do we run to the end of the funds that were are relegated to us for this purpose, or do we go ahead and make an earlier adjustment to the salaries because of the issues at hand, supposedly. So I guess I would ask that the board weigh in on that and decide if you are ready to make decisions on that this morning. And if you are fine, we can enter discussions, or do we need some more time to review? I think Lisa has some information. I don't know whether you have it with you. As far as salaries that you found commensurate with what the board thinks they ought to be, or do we go ahead and we got some numbers too that we could look at that Monica and Janet have found for surrounding counties and what they're paying right now. So I'm going to open it up. What would you like? Would you like to go ahead and pursue this morning and see what kind of information is available and enough to make a good decision on the changing of the salaries for the administrators?
Today's as good as any.
Okay. Did you bring anything with you, Lisa, on your side?
No, I don't need to. I got it on the top of my head. Just a little background. The county board chair receives a salary survey, which is a voluntary reporting from all the counties in the state of Illinois on salary positions, and then there's also some hourly information and benefits as well. And I was asked, because this is an election year, I was asked to go in and do a study to find what this information was for counties of a similar population. And so I did that for others as well, including the circuit clerk, and the treasurer, and any of those positions, as well as our own county board ones, and to make sure that we were within the market. And so we chose the median, the average of salary range, and that's what, because you have to do that within a certain period of time before elections. And so that's what we have done with those who are up for election this year. So we are not giving anybody who is elected, any individual, a raise, but that position, to make sure that it is within the market for those positions across the state of similar size. So because I have that information, I picked 5 counties, and one of them is within our area. The others are not. They're throughout the state. And the average for a public health administrator is just over $79,000. So we have that information as far as a baseline for counties that would be doing similar, not exact, but similar activities and similar responsibilities to what we would have here.
Okay, all right, thank you. This, if I'm not mistaken, this was the most recent survey that we got from different counties, public health departments, and what they have. So you would just pass those out so everybody can look at that. And then keep going. No.
This is what my salary was before COVID, before I went to salaries. That happened that year.
Everybody got copies? Okay. On this, you can tell the counties that are somewhat near or not far from our here. And this goes through from 18 to 21. Janet mentioned, or I checked, her salary in 21 was raised to that. Her salary before COVID was the top number, that's 74, 7.7. And all the other counties are listed, and you can see kind of where they fall. I didn't make an average of any of them, just that that's where they were. I also, we made one differentiation. Although we don't have a dentist right now, we are planning on still beginning and maintaining a dentist. And so there will be a dental clinic aspect to that, which is one county beside ours that has that, over in Douglas. So these are just numbers that we're given. We have no way of verifying for sure, other than some administrators pretty much responded to the survey.
No, this is actually, what site was that? It was an official site. It was an official, it was a state site.
Okay. All right, so there's the history on those from our point of view, and open for discussion. salaries for the COVID period. It was my intention, and they will both vouch for it, that we, since the funds weren't directly being collected from Edgar County, I felt like it was the right thing to do when those funds stopped. We would revert back to more MA, because the extra time that was being dedicated to the COVID program and oversight obviously would be stopped by them, because the funds would stop. And at that point, there was to be a readjustment on the salaries, and they were both in line with that. So.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You mentioned her pay was increased in 21. My question is, who increased it?
Yeah, that was a contention. We had a personnel meeting. I don't think the trail was there sufficiently that it was in the minutes, but it was decided, Dr. Rico and I were actually the ones that looked at the information and made the decision. I made the executive decision to go ahead with that. Told the county treasurer, gave them the information, signed the document, and they received it and started doing that at the time.
So the board didn't approve it?
Absolutely didn't. It's the way it looked in the minutes. There's nothing that shows that it does,
So
Council.
there really wasn't a pay raise, she just received an increase in pay without authorization?
The simple yes is to that answer. So, again, a problem that we got to fix. So, okay. And that's what we're trying to do right now, for sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Lisa, you were talking about looking at several counties. Are these the counties that are on this list?
No.
Because I come up with a very different average number from this list versus.
Right.
Crawford was the closest.
Okay.
Well, I'll just speak bluntly a little bit. When we got in, all the governmental bodies in this COVID period got a lot of money. You all know it. There was like all kinds of money thrown around. Some of it for good reasons, some of it maybe questionable. But I think that, as you can tell, when we looked at Dr. Rico and I looked, and I don't know whether he can confirm or not, 20 and 21, when they had the COVID funds available to use, you could see a trend that they started increasing the salaries for administrators right now. And some of them were very hefty increases, but again, some of these people were doing a lot of extra work. They really were. And good, bad, or indifferent, I didn't see a reason to penalize these people because they were asked to do more for no change in salary. So that was why I made that decision. As soon as we have to pay for it, obviously we were going to look at it differently. But we had the funds available, and it was given to our board for the reason of COVID-related matters and oversight of the program. So that's why we did, with the idea that it would be adjusted when the time came and they were taken away, which is supposed to be this end of December.
So what you're saying is that at 74,000, I'm just gonna throw it out there, is what their original salary was, and you gave them an increase to 118.
Yes.
And you're going to expect them to turn around and give that away at the end of the year and go back to 74,000.
That was 4 years ago, that salary was in place, Scotty. It wasn't last year, it was 4 years ago. So there's probably would have been an adjustment a little bit on that, but who knows what.
Sure.
I mean, but
And that, excuse me, but the $118,000 was based on my previous year, because the hours that we were working at that time, we were not salaried. No one here was salaried.
well,
And that was-
that's another issue we probably need to talk about, because I don't know why, I wasn't involved at the time, but it came to light when the county board hired an HR firm to help them with their HR programs, that we didn't have anybody here that wasn't hourly, including an administrator, which is not supposed to be, because at least you should have your administrator exempt, just by law, right, Kim, pretty much? Or you're probably not labor law guy, so anyway, that was definite, we should make a change, and so when Jeff called me, I told him we would look at it and try to make the change appropriately. So that's when it came into what they were doing and what they were getting in an overtime situation, because obviously since hourly people get overtime. So it was an elevated salary, but at the same point, they got their timesheets and things that show that they were doing a lot of extra work. And so I think that the problem, the intent was right. Obviously, the recording and things did not work well on that process. So we're going to have to fix that, along with getting salaries in line with more of what the expected workload is going to be going forward.
which was always the plan.
Just to clarify, so taking a look, so this is at 2021. So where do you put in your assistant administrator? So you're saying that Jasper and Douglas had multiple administrative staff. Does that mean they have multiple salary positions or multiple positions they consider administrative?
Support, administrative support, as in clerical, as in
Clerical, okay.
secretary.
So Edgar, how would you describe that to make it apples to apples? As far as support staff, do you have anybody else that's salaried that you would consider administrative in 2021?
No, I don't think, right.
So in 2021, then Janet was the only administrator, and you had no administrative staff, no assistants?
Just an assistant administrator. No administrative staff, no.
So you did have an assistant administrator?
Yes, I mean, Monica is, you know, she's the reason we're a certified health department, you know, right now, because she completely, she submitted our I-plan, which is what makes us a certified health department in the state. And that was a big job, and she's better at that kind of thing than I am. She has the background and the knowledge to be able to do that kind of thing. That's not the only thing that is necessary to be done here. Not all health departments have an assistant administrator. We are fortunate in that, you know, Monica and I we have different backgrounds. We had an assistant administrator before Monica. So, you know, we're just fortunate to have been able to have the right mix of people to do a good job. And that's why we have an assistant administrator.
Okay, so you did have an assistant administrator, and your assistant administrator was hourly
Till Jeff notified
until
Ollie and said,
through 2021. Okay, so apples to apples, you'd have, has one administrative staff up here.
Just another question, and I apologize for being, asking all these, but not being here before, prior to July,
Understood.
when did you girls decide to switch jobs, and who gave that approval?
we didn't just switch jobs. That was a discussion that I had with the board. I've been here for now 11 and a half years. The last 3 years took a toll on my personal life. I have been performing 2 jobs since I started in 2011. I have been the business administrator / finance officer as well as the administrator. Those are 2 separate positions and were before I started. That was, the business manager job was my job I signed on for originally. And that's my background, that's what I'm good at. And when, months went by and the health department they asked me numerous times after the other administrator left, they asked me numerous times to take the position as the administrator. They were happy with my work. I said that was not something that I wanted to do. The board advertised, pursued, interviewed administrators. Had one that agreed, had her second interview, they offered her the job. She called me the day she was supposed to start and said she changed her mind, she did not want to take the job. So I brought that to the board, and again, I was asked if I would consider the position, and by that time I had been here for 6 months. I knew more about the health department by then, and I was willing to take that position as well. So after, like I said, the last 3 years, Monica and I have put in our time, and it took a toll on our personal lives, both of us. I was ready to step back, as in be able to actually be gone from the health department for maybe a week and take an actual vacation for the first time in 3 years. That was my goal. So that, I asked the board to consider me stepping back and just becoming assistant administrator and financial officer, and to consider Monica for the administrative position.
I did interview for that position, so, just like anybody would if they were
Sure.
considering a position, so I did go before the board and interview.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So at that time though, and I'm sorry, I've only read back through the November 2021 minutes. So at that time, so in 2021, was your title assistant administrator?
Yes.
Okay, so at that time, the assistant administrator was hourly, the administrator was salaried.
That time.
And then when the roles were determined to be switched, then both positions were salary.
No, I think Jeff did he contact you, Ollie, and said that the assistant administrator position needed to be salaried?
When we
And
first
I think
talked,
that
it was just the
happened.
administrator
Okay.
that he
I think
was
that happened.
talking about.
About three
April,
months
maybe.
later, 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
There was a little question about, obviously, the designation, what's an exempt employee or a person do, firefighter, all that. basically Janet was the one doing that for the public health department. So, but then in further review, the group, the HR group, felt like that Monica should be also the salary person.
Okay, so at that time, there was conversation about changing roles. Is there anything documented about what your roles would be? Are there position descriptions? Because at this point, your salaries are pretty darn close to the same, so we are basically paying as a county for 2 full-fledged administrators. So was that process completed and I'm just not aware?
There are position descriptions for those positions, but I will state, I didn't set those. I mean, those kinds of questions are really board questions. I'm an employee, and so I didn't set salaries. I didn't ask. I didn't ask for raises or any specific salary. So, you know, even when I was told that I would be salaried, I did not come back with any sort of request. So, you know, asking me specifically, I can't really answer those questions for you.
I think the reason they were fairly close because through the COVID period, they were both fairly close because they were both doing a lot of extra overtime work. And so they were pretty close to the same at that time. So that's why I left it, at least until Monica got her job, her official title, left them alone and then readjust whenever the time came.
I will say, when I was hired originally in through the dental program, and the dental staff works a 40-hour week. So I was hired in at 40 hours, and I have worked a 40-hour week the entire time I've been here. So that might be a little bit of a difference, but I'm not, I mean.
Yeah. Not a lot. Anything else?
I got a question.
Okay.
The COVID money we throw around everywhere, I don't mind paying more when they're doing more. But the problem you got is, are you figuring when the retirement comes, you gotta pay for that forever? You know, so where's that money gonna come from?
Am I correct in that, and I'm no expert on IMRF at all, am I correct in that the pension is based on your previous 3 years' salary? Is that?
I think my understanding is it depends on which category the person's in. So I would, I mean, if that's a specific question, you guys are authorized me, I can contact IMRF and talk to them about that, but I can't answer.
I mean, that's something that's gonna affect the county.
Well, as we've made perfectly clear, all of us had intended for the salaries to go back to a closer range, as all other health department administrators are going back to. Before all of this, I know Monica and I were neither one really planning to leave in the next 3 years, but if IMRF, if that is the case with IMRF, and it is based on 3 years' salary, then the last 2 years, were Monica and I to stay, would not even come into play.
I think it's the highest years.
I don't think so.
It's cumulative. Well, actually, we're going to find out from the expert. When we get back to this, then we'll know that.
And again, this, I'm no expert on IMRF, and if IMRF was even affected by this, I did not know. I do believe there should be compensation for working basically 60 hours a week, which is what we were doing. So I don't know very many people that would, work 60 to 70 hours a week and be okay with a 37.5 hour or 40-hour week. So, regardless, I don't know who you could have gotten to stay and basically work for free for all those extra hours, because I don't know many people that would do that.
Well, and that's the difference between salaried and hourly. When you're salaried, sometimes are tougher than others. Not saying that an increase in compensation if your role had changed wouldn't be warranted, but that's the difference between salaried and hourly. Is hourly, you are compensated for every hour you work, and salary, that's looked on as part of the role, and there are benefits.
And had I been salaried back then, that would have been the discussion.
Mhm.
Are we ready to make some sort of decision?
Before you do that, are you folks going to have a public comment session at your meeting?
We missed that part.
Is this set up for a public meeting discussion?
It's on the agenda.
Okay. So it is. Let's have one then, if you're wanting one. It's all right.
Yeah, I think,
We need a break.
the issue with, and I think you covered it, and you're doing the right thing right now. I was gonna talk about the going into closed session. There's never a requirement that a public body go into closed session. I mean, you can if you want, you don't have to. And there's limited exceptions to go into closed session. And I'm glad somebody asked a question and this discussion was out in the open. It needs to be out in the open. You should probably be a little more specific on your agendas when you talk about, list items for action. And you mentioned a lot of, in your discussion, you mentioned a lot of we got together and we decided
Yeah.
and we did this. I would like a definition of who we is, because it's my understanding that nothing in the increase in pay, even for extra COVID money, was done by the board. And somebody needs to address how to fix that portion. Because if the board didn't authorize it, it never should have happened, and somebody needs to decide whether you're going to claw that money back, or you're going to let it go without clawing the money back. If the board didn't approve it, it shouldn't have happened.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
I've got several things I'd like to cover. And I know there's a few new board members, and it's entirely up to you if you want to answer this, but how many have actually taken the Open Meetings Act training? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I would urge you to take that, because violations of the Open Meetings Act is a Class C misdemeanor. It's a crime. Now, although rarely prosecuted in this state, it is in many other states, but it is a crime. But it's a two-pronged problem you have. Mr. Smith, the records that you gave the treasurer, the one in February, says the Edgar County Board of Health is increasing the salary of the administrator. That is a false statement. You know it's false. You've admitted to that today. The Board of Health didn't do that. This document under the criminal forgery laws is a forgery. The one that you did in April 26th also says the same thing. It is a forgery under the criminal definition of forgery. These documents are not true and accurate, and they were never approved by the Board of Health. This alone is worthy of your resignation. This document doesn't have a whole lot of explanation. It has Ms. Mason's name at the top. I don't know who wrote it. And at the bottom, it tallies up $7,574.40. Well, this equates to a number that was paid in what's called retro pay. There was no record anywhere in the minutes of that discussion anywhere that there's going to be retro pay. None. Another real problem. Where it becomes a problem, when you decide to do nothing and whitewash it and say, hey, we made a mistake, which you did, we're just going to go forward and correct salaries. We, the taxpayers, are on the hook not only for the pensions on this, but any taxpayer can file a QTAM action to recover these funds that were illegally distributed. This Board of Health, which means the county, which means the taxpayers, could face a lawsuit for the recovery of all that unauthorized pay. And I think it might be appropriate, because what has gone down here over the years, I mean, we've already had 2 convictions out of this facility. I believe you were here during that time frame too. How many have read your bylaws? I don't know when they were written. I know there's a lot of things that need to be addressed. As far as the members and the definition of members, it's inconsistent with the law. That needs to be addressed. The outlines of the duties of the officers of the board, I don't know, were quoted, and I don't know if you were accurately quoted in the Prairie Press, that the minutes were muddy. Who records the minutes? Who's the board secretary?
Well, I'm not the board secretary, but I'm usually trying to do the minutes
Okay.
during the meeting.
The board is to have a secretary. The board secretary records the minutes. If the minutes were muddy, why was there no reference at the next month when all the minutes were approved? If they were muddy, why did we approve them? Why didn't we correct them? That's a terrible failing, because you can't default back. And in the EMS business, which I've been in most of my adult life, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. There's a lot that's not written down that did happen when we go back and look at the records that are problematic. Within your bylaws, members of the board are required to attend regular meetings of the board. Absence from 3 consecutive meetings without an executive excused absence will result in resignation. This board has no power to make such a declaration. The law outlines how board members are appointed and how they can be removed. You can't add to the law. The law is very specific and gives the county board chairman the power to remove. You folks don't have the power to remove an appointed board member by the county board. You can't do it. You can't create a policy that does it. And I'm confident that when your state's attorney looks at this, that he will see the things, and I will give him copies of what I've highlighted here. All questions before the Board of Health shall be decided by a majority vote of all members present. Back to these letters that I referred to as forged documents. Board of Health never voted. You didn't follow your own bylaws. So if you can't follow your own bylaws, therein lies another grounds for resignation. Budget and disbursements. The Board of Health shall review salary ranges and increments for the staff members as outlined in the personnel policies. When does that happen? We're identifying now it hasn't happened. An outside entity identified the problem. It should be the board that's identifying that problem. Committees. The president of the Board of Health, standing committees, one of them is personnel, provides annual performance review of administrator. What you've done now is you've allowed a board chairman, no matter who the chairman is elected, but you've allowed a board chairman to create a committee of their choosing to determine the review of an administrator. That's a board function. The board hires and appoints an administrator. The board should be the one doing the evaluation, not a committee. A committee can review things and bring it to the attention of the board, but your bylaws are terribly outdated and inconsistent with standard business practice. How many have read your personnel policy manual? I pulled out several pages of the 70-some pages, and I only highlighted a few things here that I believe are very important. The department was formed by resolution of the Edgar County Board. It was not formed through a referendum. Some folks had believed it was, but according to the records, it was a county board resolution. That can be rescinded. We have a hospital right across here. You work there, I believe. There may be justification. We don't need a health department with a hospital that close, at least for limited services, because there are some required services. Your definitions of employees, and this one is just, it's just poor overview. because I don't believe this was the intent when it was written. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types of employees: full-time, part-time, hourly, contractual, and temporary. But your language under hourly, which your administrators were hourly, it says an employee who does not work a set amount of hours per week, and your time cards reflect, or the payroll records reflect, you don't work a set time because it's different every week, and is paid an hourly basis for the actual time worked, hourly employees are not eligible for any fringe benefits. Well, I'm assuming you folks are on county health insurance, aren't you? But according to your policy, you're not entitled to benefits. I don't believe the policy's intent. I agree, I don't believe that was the intent, because I believe full-time employees should have their benefits, but it's poorly written and it needs to be corrected, because this says you shouldn't have benefits. Compensation. It says the administrator shall determine the salaries and or wages of his or her employees based on merit and qualifications in conjunction with the board. That's inconsistent with the law. The board fixes salaries of employees. The board, not the administrator. Your policy is wrong. It's inconsistent with the law. Under the responsibility section, supervisors immediately notify law enforcement where there is a reasonable belief that the observer or complaint of conduct violates criminal laws of the state of Illinois. It's been noted in the minutes. Thank you for acknowledging you write the minutes, Ms. Mason. In those minutes, it's acknowledged that board action was taken when there wasn't a quorum. That's a crime. Did you notify anybody? I don't think you did. I won't get into the sexual harassment stuff, but that whole paragraph needs serious cleaning up. Reporting responsibilities. Employees are encouraged and expected to report suspected violations of federal, state, or local laws, rules, regulations, or suspected ethical violations. There's so many violations that we've uncovered just with a matter of a few FOIAs, it's unbelievable. Now granted, we do this for a living, looking at local government accountability, but there's things in here that are grossly out of control. That lies on your shoulders as the chairman, because a lot of this you've been responsible for. The Board of Health is responsible for informing the county board of all complaints of unethical or unlawful conduct pursuant to this policy. I don't know how often that happens. We've got several tips. If there's been several complaints, I'm waiting on the response to the FOIA to determine how many, to see whether or not those were forwarded to the county board, which policy requires. Under conflict of interest, it's the responsibility of the Edgar County Public Health Department employees and members of the immediate families to avoid situations involving conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflict of interest. Many have said, I don't necessarily agree because there's a balancing act that takes place. Conflicts of interest are well defined in the law, but a lot of folks are concerned you're sitting as chairman while you're also the administrator over the hospital. Edgar County Health Department employees shall not, and this is one that I think an employee has a right to do, but it says they shall not advertise or solicit for outside work of any type where the advertisement or solicitation is nothing more than, hey, I'm asking for a job. It says they can't make any reference to employment with the Edgar County Health Department. Well, I should be able to list where I'm currently employed. You shouldn't be able to take that right away from somebody. That needs to be cleaned up. Private vehicle usage. You've got a laundry list of stuff you can't do. How about just simplify it and say you must follow all vehicle codes? It's a violation of this policy for any employee to falsify a timekeeping record. Well, I would argue, Mr. Chairman, you falsified timekeeping records because this references a salary position that was inconsistent with any board action. Reimbursable expenses. I'm still waiting on this one. This is a board action that probably has not taken place. That's why I did ask for the ordinance or the resolution. It outlines all your reimbursable expenses when you go on a trip, you go to a conference, hotels, motels, food, whatever. There's a law, a specific law in the Local Government Act that outlines a requirement to have an ordinance for travel reimbursement. And it outlines the requirements that must be met before you actually go on that trip. And if you don't have that ordinance, you're not complying with the law. So that policy needs to be cleaned up. Personal appearance. Employees should be aware that they are representing the department and should be professional in actions, dress, and personal hygiene. That's a really subjective one. I don't know. I mean, everybody has a different perception nowadays. I mean, I took all my earrings and tattoos off today, but you understand my point. employees are expected to be at their desk working at their scheduled times. Nowhere in here does it outline the scheduled times that positions are supposed to be working, so there's no way to do a checks and balance on that. Work performance evaluations, it goes through all the evaluation process. Employees typically evaluated after 90 days. Performance evaluations are conducted by an employee's direct supervisor or the administrator, with the documentation turned into the administrator, who then places it in the employee's file. Within the policy, there's no reference to the board doing anything as far as a review of the administrator. However, the board is responsible for the hiring of employees and fixing of compensation. I think they should be doing the actual final review as it's presented. Prohibited conduct. This is a big one, and I'm almost done. This is prohibited for all your employees at the health department. And this is back to do as I say, not as I do. Falsifying department records. This, sir, that was turned into the treasurer, are falsified records. They're not true. Your employees are prohibited from doing that. The fourth one on there is theft of time. As we get more time records, we'll know whether that took place or not. But back to the falsifying of department records. These records are not true and accurate. The board never qualified it, and I wrote one of the first pushbacks on this whole COVID issue with masks and closures and restaurants and everything else. But within this agency, you folks pushed and gave businesses a hard time who tried to stay open. But you, sir, sat in a restaurant with other board members and ate dinner with no mask and everybody else is closed. And that's hypocrisy at the highest level. But I agree that restaurant should have never closed. I'm glad they didn't, because the governor didn't have the power to do what he did. But my point is the hypocrisy has to stop, and you, sir, should step down. I'm done with my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Anyone else?
Excuse me, I didn't hear your comment.
So that was a long 3 minutes.
Do you have an adopted public comment policy?
I just know that normally that's what you get. You should be very pleased that you got to say
Do
anything.
you have an adopted public comment policy?
I didn't say you couldn't talk for 3 minutes.
Ma'am,
That you could not talk
I'll
for
ask
more
the
than
board.
3.
Has the board adopted a public comment policy? Okay, that's part of the Open Meetings Act.
I did not make a comment that you could only talk for 3 minutes. I didn't make that comment.
I didn't say you made that comment, ma'am. I'm addressing the board right now.
What's your argument? Well,
I'm addressing the board.
and
The board, excuse me, this is my time.
Oh, of
That's
course
right.
it is. Okay. All
The
yours.
board has an obligation to adopt a public comment policy that enhances the public's right to speak. If you put a limit, then you can enforce the limit. If you don't have a policy, you can't say, oh, your 3 minutes is up, because you've never adopted a policy. You have to adopt a policy. That's part of knowing how to do a meeting. And you've taken your Open Meetings Act training. It's in the training, so you would know that a policy is needed to enforce the time period. So don't tell me, oh, that was a long 3 minutes. I'm not stuck to 3 minutes, and you should know that.
I've got a question. I was wondering, like your budget. Okay, I had read or heard somewhere that you were going to be levying more than 5% for this next year. And
Not
then
more than 5%.
And then I
5%
heard
was requested.
You weren't.
I don't
So
know.
you're not going to have a hearing? Because I thought, heaven forbid, with all this money you got, you shouldn't be asking for more than 5% for next year.
Well, the money that we received, our COVID funds, those federal funds, were used to pay our staff. It's not funds that were used to,
Well, I don't
Do
know.
anything
and I
other
question
than
how some
that.
of them were really used, but I was in hopes you wouldn't have a levy out there, or have to have a hearing, so ask for more
I
money.
don't know anything
Because
about
we've
that.
just been hit as hard as we can be hit, we taxpayers. And this money, you know, you talk about coming from the government, hey, that's us, it's our money, that's where the government gets their money, it's from taxing us. They don't do anything, they just spend it, so,
Agreed.
right?
Where you're at.
And don't forget to vote November the 8th. Yeah, Lisa.
Just as a point of clarification, from county board's perspective, we do receive all the budget requests from the different departments. And this is where Jeff Boyd is very focused on taking a look at all of the levy requests. And ultimately, the county board will determine whether or not a request is honored, whether or not additional funds or reduction in funds is done. But if, for example, could be any entity, for example, if the public health board says I need a larger percentage levy increase, then they would have to justify it. And if it was justified, then we would have to determine whether or not it was allowed. And if it was allowed to go that way, then would there, according to law, need to be a public hearing. So this is a standard process that a board will, or a public entity will ask for an increase, and then we have to try as the ultimate decision makers on that, where we feel like our taxpayers can.
Hey, how many taxing bodies are there that you have to make the determination on?
There are not very many that are within our scope to determine.
Oh, okay, I just wondered, yeah, okay. I know we've got a lot of taxing
We have
bodies,
a
the
lot,
whole
but-
state,
Right.
like 7,000.
That's all.
Well, you gotta go.
Yeah, I'm gonna court hearing to get ready for, but yeah.
Thank you
let me
for
know if you have
coming by.
other
We'll,
questions and all.
Be sure those are highlighted.
Thank you.
Get in touch with questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to decide on a salary? Or do we need to talk more about this in a future meeting?
I would request that you decide now. And I'm more than happy to step out.
As am I, more than happy.
Okay, all right, please.
Do you want Marissa to stay?
She's doing
She's
minutes.
recording.
Okay.
Okay, thoughts? Suggestions?
I'm just not sure, I still like the idea of the COVID money being thrown out there for that. I understand that everybody was using it, but I just don't, I think that was a poor decision. Sorry, Dr. Rico,
I agree.
Ollie, but
Well, I think the alternative was, hiring another person to work those hours. I mean, that was really the choice. We had someone working substantially more hours to do these tasks that were directly related to COVID. So it wasn't, like 10% more time for administration, which is, I think, the intent.
but it was a pretty good increase for two people versus just one person.
Yeah, well, they both were doing that type of work, so that was the number of hours that were actually being covered, which was a lot. And, so, again, not done the right way, but I think the intent was, again, to do what should have been done for them at the time.
I still feel like it's going to be pretty tough for somebody to say at the end of the year, we're going to lose that COVID money and we're going to go back to whatever the salary that we decide. I still feel like that's not going to work out very well, but hey.
Well, Scott, to me, it's kind of like it is extra work. I mean, they were tasked with doing, for that period of time, the oversight of that program.
No, I understand that part.
But I had no
I would have
problem.
thought that would have been in a bonus section, and I don't even know if we can do that legally on this type of a thing. I would have thought that would have been in a bonus section versus you adding to their salary. That's what I'm getting at. Because if I did this as an employer. If I did this to my people and then turned around at the end of the year and said, I'm about ready to take 38 grand from you every time a year, they're gonna go, see ya, wouldn't wanna be that.
Well, I
So-
think it hinged on whether funds were going to be available or not.
It doesn't work that way with people. Ollie, I'm sorry, but it doesn't work that way out here in the real world. It doesn't work that way. People get used to that money. It's hard to take it away from them. Sorry, that's just the way it works.
Well, I got an argument the other way, but that's all right. I don't disagree with your thought process on it, because to a point, I agree with it completely. People do get used to an income, and it's hard to
take it away once you've had it.
It is. So, okay, we'll have a conversation.
Sorry, more conversation on the topic. So, if it has been determined, and I'm sorry Tim had to leave, if it has been determined that none of the raises were done appropriately or with the board documented action, then that's like it never happened. And so we would have to go back to where they were legally.
Yeah.
And at that point, so we really have two issues here. One is, are we going to stick with where we were the last time it was legal? And two, what are we going to do about what's happened since then? How do you rectify it? And I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm not pretending that I do. But at what point were we when it was last legal? So at that point, we go from there. And where were we with having an administrator and an assistant administrator? And we would go from those salaries and move forward. And right now, we have, again, not necessarily where it should be. Right now, we have an assistant administrator who says she doesn't want to be the administrator anymore. She wants to step back, and she's making more money than your administrator. So we need to go back to that point and move forward.
Well, am I correct in saying that they were, we were also at the time paying overtime until we were told not to? That was in '21. So up to that, we are okay with what it was at the time, paying overtime, because we hadn't done anything to rectify that situation.
And when you were paying, and am I correct, you were only paid, so in 2021, both,
And 2020, actually.
okay, 2020 and 21, both of your administrator, Monica was considered an assistant administrator?
Yeah.
And her position description and everything matched that? Because I don't know.
I don't either, to be honest, but I think if we had an assistant administrator
It was
position,
her. Yeah.
it was her.
So I don't know if in 20 and 21, she had a position that, at least for part of it, that it was okay that she was salary, or that she was hourly and receiving overtime. I don't know that. And I don't know the mechanism for how far you go back to rectify. I don't know the point, I don't know the mechanism, but I know we need to go back.
Who do we need to check with? Because I don't know that we're going to be able to make an educational decision today on this because of all the problems that have pre-existed with this. So I'm just not sure that we can make a decision on that today. But
Well, how
we
to
need
rectify, you're saying, or to set their salaries?
either right now, because I don't know how you're going to be able to make that decision. Because everything that we do could be wrong today as well as it was before. So you don't want to make the wrong decision today. You want to get an education from somebody, that somebody's got to be smarter in here than we are, that can let us know where we need to line this out. Somebody's got to be able to figure that out. Now, where I don't know if we need to go to the Edgar County Board to talk to them to get their opinion, or where we need to go, but somebody's got to be able to feed us some information so that we don't make a mistake again.
And I would suggest that it is probably the HR company that we contract, the county board contracts to try to keep us out of issues.
This thing.
Mhm. This would be one of them. It's not the only one, it's just the hottest one, and perhaps the largest. But we do have a company that we contract with to say that they know all the legal ins and outs. And I would suggest that you ask the county board to have them focus on this. So we have the how do you rectify the back, and then how do you move forward? And they're related, but I think there are a couple of philosophical things here that shouldn't be too tough. That you shouldn't have an assistant administrator who said she wants to back off making more than your administrator. That I just can't
Well,
grasp.
I think that's
So-
totally right. And she would be totally agreeable with that.
And I really don't care whether she's agreeable, because she's the employee. Now, how she acts to our discussion and our move is hers, but she has no role in this. This is ours, and that's for us to determine. But first, we need to know what are the position descriptions, because if our assistant administrator has the same description as administrator or more responsibility, we got a problem there too.
Mhm.
Why do we have two? I
Does
understand.
anybody else have two? Or do they all just have one?
I don't know, that was kind of what I was getting at here. Does Jasper have four that are
Yeah.
similar, or do they have one administrator and then some clerical folks who follow through on the nuts and bolts?
Because you know each one of them's not getting 134,000 apiece.
Right. I would certainly assume their counties are not open to that, or they don't know about it.
Not with a population of 9,500.
No. So I think we need more, I suggest we need more information.
Well,
So do we make a motion to have the county board investigate what we need to do? Where do we go here?
I don't know that the county board, Lisa, really needs to be involved in it. The HR, I agree with the HR group.
Right.
They are the ones, they're the consultants for the board who's getting the HR question asked to them. So I think I would feel comfortable with them addressing what needs to be done. And as long as the county board's blessing is on it, I think that would.
Right, and county board doesn't want to get involved in the nuts and bolts. That's really not our role. We're supposed to try to just be
Sure.
administrative with one representative on here.
Right. Well, if that's the case, no. What do you got, Kurt?
If I may, identify the questions you need answered. Number one, how do you recover the funds paid that were not authorized by law? That has to be addressed. I don't understand making the employees whole, but you have to make the taxpayers whole. So that's the first and most important question in my opinion. The second one is, when the recovery of that process, how do you address that from a payroll standpoint to correct the IMRF pension spiking that takes place in this process? Because even if they were to just pay it back, it's on the books on payroll, and it's going to be part of IMRF, and IMRF, we the taxpayers will pay on that elevated even if they paid it back. So your IMRF issue has to be addressed, how that money, when it does get paid back, because it needs to be paid back. And how you do that is entirely up to the board. But those two questions are very important. And then after you identify your job description, identify what is the commensurate salary for that type of work consistent with your other health departments throughout the state. But if you can put those in question format and give those to your state's attorney, that's a huge starting point. If you leave it generic, it's just not detailed enough to get the answers you're looking for. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think too, Kim's gonna, he may not like it, but we are gonna be his best friend for a while. And we're just gonna have to have some guidance and, on all those things to make sure we get it right going forward, so. And he said he's willing to do it, so that's okay. I would like to get these answers as quick as we can so that we can move forward with Monica and Janet. I know Monica's, it's bothering her a lot. She wants to get this cleaned up and move forward. So we can, Lisa, you will check with the HR group from the board.
Yeah, I'll communicate with Tim and with them so that those two stay together in communication and the board is pretty much out of it.
That would be
Yeah.
the best thing, I think. And we have, our board concentrates on being the right, so.
Okay. And county board study session is next Tuesday at the highway department at 9:30. Anybody's welcome to attend at any given time. And then our county board meeting then is on Wednesday at 9 o'clock at the courthouse. And again, everybody's always welcome to come. We welcome public comment and participation.
All right, so everybody's got their things to get done. Mostly you, Lisa, I think, okay?
I'm good.
So we will set the meeting date once we find out some information that we can act on. So you can deal with Monica and let her know, and we can get the meeting set. Is everybody okay with 7 o'clock for this meeting? So, okay. So we probably ought to add any extra meetings, it'll be 7 o'clock also.
Want to make a motion to adjourn? Sorry.
Go right ahead, I'll accept it. Second? Motion passed. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys.